So I'm Ellen Lewis,
I'm Ginny Stein.
and we are your friends from Crazy for You. And today I wanted to talk about something you probably read about in the newsletter this week, but it comes up a lot, don't you think?
Yes, in fact, while I was working earlier this week, it came up a question, one of the questions that we're going to address
Right.
about
Knitting myths. Stuff like, what is a myth to you? Right?
something that's get handed down and handed down and handed down that may or may not be true.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So, I mean, and you hear it repeated enough,
Right.
right? That it ends up feeling true.
Feeling true.
Right? And you
And-
believe it if you don't know any better, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes if you do, sometimes
it
you're
can
like,
be- you know better, but it's just like all those people, all those years can't have been wrong.
can they? So that's the question. Can they be wrong? Are they wrong?
Are they wrong?
Right?
Well, it depends on what you end up proving for yourself.
Right.
Right.
So it's sort of like everything that you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt and question authority,
right.
see for yourself,
Mhm.
right?
Work it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the one that you heard this week?
Um, Somebody wanted to make something and it required a pattern that required a DK yarn.
Okay.
Okay. And so she was questioning about some of the different yarns that we had. And I said, well, depending on your pattern and your gauge, you may be able to go to a worsted weight or even maybe even to a heavy sport.
Right.
So it just kind of depends on the look that you want and what needle you decide you're going to use, and
Right.
if you can make that gauge. So, and so
Well, did you show her? Was she happy?
I got we looked at a few different yarns,
Mhm.
and so I think she ended up. Let's see, trying to think which one. She ended up with um, she ended up with worsted weight.
She did.
Yeah. Mhm.
I think it's so interesting because, we as more beginning knitters, I think, tend to look at what's the gauge of the pattern
Mhm.
without necessarily thinking about what is the yarn that the designer has specified. Because the gauge of the pattern, it might be knit at 20 stitches over 4 inches, but they might be using fingering weight yarn, which means they're going to get a really draped without it.
Right.
Right? Or not. So, I mean, this is why you and I do the same thing when we swatch, right?
Right.
We've got this whole thing. I mean, this is a fingering weight yarn. You guys remember this. This is the Poema Cashmere,
Mhm.
which the the ball band said was chunky.
Yes.
What was that about?
Right. So, yeah, because it was said chunky, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, chunky. Looking at this on how high did you go?
So I ended up going, let's see, I put my little pearl stitches in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I ended up working this a little bit on an 8. So I started it, on a small, and we always going up our needle size to show that even though this is a fingering weight yarn, you're going to knit it at a different gauge if it's for socks than you are if it's for a sweater.
Or even a shawl.
Right.
So and actually, if since you're on an 8 there, I mean, to me, a chunky is going to be something that's going to be at least a 9,
Yes.
if not a 13.
Yes.
And so, this is getting looser and drapier the bigger the needle. So, and my thing is always, I kind of look through it to see what kind of air comes through.
Right. Are you going to be arrested if you wear that?
Well, there's that part too. But
Well,
I mean,
what I mean.
obviously you're up at this point and it's going to be a shawl, if you're
Yes.
up to, if it, and perhaps that's why they called it a chunky, because they were thinking shawls and they want lots and lots of drape on it. So it's something that will wrap around you.
Right. Just because this is intended to be knit at a looser gauge doesn't make it a chunky yarn.
No.
It's still fingering.
It's still fingering.
Right.
When you actually look at the weight, the
Right.
yardage that's in there,
Yeah.
you're not going to get that kind of yardage with that weight in a
Right.
chunky yarn,
Right.
an honest to God chunky yarn.
Yeah. Not a legit chunky yarn. So let's talk about another, while I have this in my hands, let's talk about another myth, and that is blocking.
Blocking.
Right. So this hasn't been blocked, right? And if I were going to block this, I'd have a couple purposes in mind, right? I would want to stop the curl,
Right.
or at
That's
least try
try to stop the curl.
try to stop the curl. And I would want to see how much bloom I would get,
Right.
right?
And
And that's not, those are two things we know blocking can do.
it's gonna, your stitches are going to look a little bit different,
Right.
depending on the makeup of the yarn.
The myth that I hear so many times is, oh, that'll block right
It'll
out.
block right out. Yes.
Not really.
Not really.
No, I mean, there are limitations to what blocking can do,
Mhm.
right?
Yes. Mhm.
So
Believe me, I know.
tell me about an experience you had.
Just, something didn't look exactly right. It didn't, sit on the, it didn't look right. This some uneven stitches, that sort of thing in there. So it was like, okay, the old thing, this is way back, before I was really doing a whole lot of stuff with blocking. But I did try to, soak the piece
Mhm.
and truly soak it,
Right.
and then had it out on a table, and actually, on a towel on a table, and sort of pinning it to where I wanted it to be, and didn't look any better.
It didn't.
It didn't change the stitching. It didn't change the stitches. The fabric changed,
Yeah.
but the stitches didn't change. So that the unevenness, there was still some uneven areas.
So I've always understood that, the more you wash a fabric,
Mhm.
that it does even, it does correct minor inconsistencies.
I think the more you do it, but the first time isn't gonna do it.
Right.
Just one blocking thing isn't going to correct your mistakes.
Are you talking about rowing out?
Um, no, not necessarily rowing out, but just uneven stitches of
Mhm.
things where, like at the end of a row,
Right.
where the stitching may be bigger.
Mhm.
And it, even though there was some seaming that was there, that's the ones that were sort of, inside that seam,
Right.
were still just bigger than I wanted them to be.
And you didn't like that.
And like
Yeah. What did you end up doing?
duplicate stitch.
That works. So let's talk about the things that blocking can do. Okay, blocking can definitely, flatten your edges temporarily,
Yeah.
not forever. Um, it can even minor stitches out.
Yes.
It can make your fabric bigger,
You can make your fabric bigger.
right?
Very much.
Very much bigger. Um, it can slightly adjust, like if you are doing a front and a back or two halves of a cardigan and it's not
Not
exactly
exactly that, or even if it is the same number of rows and your rows aren't exactly the same.
right. Right. So it can fix
Yeah,
that.
you can fix that. Mhm.
So what are the things you think, that it can't fix? What can you absolutely not fix by blocking? Well, like you said, the
So, there are, certain inconsistencies that
Right.
it's not going to fix.
too tight cast on.
Oh, yeah, too tight cast off, even and too tight cast on.
Right.
When you're doing like a shawl, at the bottom or the top,
Hmm.
you don't want something that is really tight at the bottom nor at the end.
Because you can't block that
You
out.
can't block that out.
Right.
And
So
blocking also, if it wasn't supposed to go in the washing machine and it did.
gosh, don't even start me on that. So let's talk about shawls. You have knit a lot of shawls in your day,
Yeah.
right? Now, once upon a time, we just started shawls wherever, and then I don't know, maybe it was around 2010. I don't know who it was. Somebody decided that a tab cast on was the greatest thing since sliced bread. A garter tab cast on.
Yes.
Blocking is not going to get rid of that hump.
No, it's not. And I've done a lot of garter tab cast-ons for shawls, and it doesn't. You can stretch and stretch and stretch around that little thing, but it's still going to be kind of,
A
did you say
little
a
hard.
little bump? Yeah, it's going to be a little bump. Luckily, those cast-ons aren't a whole lot of stitches, so
Yeah, they're like six, seven,
six,
seven, nine.
yeah. But you're on a, you're on a, the ones I've done anyway have been on a finer yarn.
Right.
Yeah. So, and on like a size 6 needle. So,
Well, let's talk about that whole garter tab cast on thing for a minute. Like, there's a myth that that's the way you start a shawl.
well, I know it doesn't happen all that often, but I know I had somebody in the store who was having real difficulty and she simply couldn't get it. And I said, you know what? Just cast on 7 stitches.
Well, right. Now, what's the benefit? I mean, why do we do the garter tab cast on at all? It's like that thing, that somebody decided, oh, we have to do this.
Yeah, yeah. If you're a good person like me and you follow instructions, it says to do a garter tab cast on, so you do it.
Yeah, I am not a good person. I'm gonna be like, I don't like this. I don't want a hump in the back of my thing.
It was one of those things like, there must be a reason the designer wanted to have it done this way.
Yeah,
Which is sort of what my attitude is about any pattern. That I quote trust the designer. I have learned that I should not always trust the designer.
right.
But my first time with, I'm going to trust the designer because they obviously had something in mind.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but sometimes you need to do your own thing.
Don't you feel like Ravelry's changed that a good bit?
Yeah, probably, because there are a whole lot more choices out there
Yeah.
for
Right.
to everybody. Everybody has all of these choices.
And I think people who are newer designers and they think that you have to use a garter tab cast on, and they just do, and they're not really thinking through what is my goal with
Right.
this? What is the benefit? Because I can't even identify what the benefit is of a garter tab cast on.
Right.
If you're watching and put it in the comments so that we can know why a garter tab cast on has become like the de facto shawl cast on. So let's talk too about swatching, because I think swatching is maybe one of the more misunderstood things. Oh, you have to do a swatch, you have to do it a certain way. Um, you don't have to swatch, what are your thoughts?
Well, let's see. When I started knitting seriously, a good many years ago,
At least two or three.
at least 2 or 3, I rarely swatched. Um, because I had figured out that I did knit pretty much to gauge
Mm-hmm.
that was on there, but I also was only using a few different yarns.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't this broad spectrum of yarns that was available to me. So I didn't for the most part swatch because
I didn't either.
I knew what that yarn was going to do
Right.
with me, when
Right.
I was knitting. And I was basically doing things at approximately the same gauge anyway. The
Mhm.
patterns that I was using were approximately the same age. Then when more yarns became available and different types of yarns, not just wool and or acrylics or but you were getting all those new combinations, at least new to me.
Mhm.
And then it was suddenly like, oh, this isn't working quite the way I thought it would work because it was a different type of yarn. It was a different fiber. And so it wasn't acting the same way the other fibers that I had used. And that was when it was like, I guess you need to do a little practice piece and figure out how it works.
So be honest, when was that you first started swatching?
Probably close do you want me?
I mean, was it 20 years ago, 40 years ago?
it was at least 30 years.
Okay.
It was at least 30 years ago. because it was before we moved to St. Mary's County.
Mhm.
So that I was swatching when I was knitting,
Yeah.
in Virginia.
Yeah.
So,
So I'm trying to think about it myself. I don't know that I ever really, I mean, now I do it like religiously.
yes, yeah, yeah. If I have a yarn, if I'm going to start a sweater, or not so much for shawls.
Right.
Because I figure the shawl is a shawl and I don't really need to be exact on the thing. But a sweater, if I want a sweater to fit me,
Hmm.
then, or whomever, then I want to swatch because I want to know whether I'm getting gauge, and if I'm not getting gauge, but I like the fabric, how I have to adjust the pattern.
See, I think that's a myth right there, what you said about you don't have to swatch for a shawl. I think if you're talking about a pattern that's got like a chart in it and you're expected to finish so many repeats of that pattern, and if you're knitting too loosely, you're gonna, and you gotta, you've got X amount of yarn, you're gonna run out of yarn,
That's true,
you know?
but I trust my knitting.
Right, right. So it's okay for you not to swatch. But I think for a lot of people who maybe knit really loosely or really tightly, they run the risk of running out of yarn, or if they knit really tightly, they run the risk of making something that is super tight. Now, yes, you can block it out, but it might come out and not be really the drape and everything that you want.
Probably. But again, I think it depends on the individual and the
Yeah.
experience.
Right. But as a rule, for a newer knitter, I think swatching for everything.
For a newer knitter, yes.
Yeah.
Particularly if it's a newer knitter and they're trying to do a chart of some sort,
Yeah.
then I would recommend swatching the chart.
Okay. So let's talk about that, because swatches, people think, oh, you swatch in stockinette. Swatching is more than just getting gauge for me. Swatching is if you've got a lace repeat, and for me, it's much easier to learn that lace repeat
Oh,
over 16 stitches than it is over, 387.
sure. And a well-written pattern is going to give you an opportunity to do that stitch pattern,
Right.
and to check your gauge against the stitch pattern.
So would you then, you, Ginny, the maestro, would you swatch a lace pattern in pattern? Would you do that? I mean, I know you don't have to do anything. You're like the goddess. I mean,
Yeah.
it's honest. Honestly, I know what you're saying, that you don't need to do that. But even now, do you like fiddle with the lace pattern and swatch it or practice that little repeat or not?
Not usually. Not usually.
I do.
But I will also tell you that I have done a shawl or two that have had a lace pattern in it. And I have realized that I'm not coming out with the repeat the way it
Mhm.
should. So I've done my own thing.
You did that on Verdun, didn't you?
Yes.
Oh, it's like it's a little different than Nicole's.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I mean, if they're both beautiful.
So, I mean, and if you can fake it well,
Right,
then and as long as, and again, it was a shawl.
right,
So, and I managed to get it so that it was correct from side to side,
right.
and and it created a pretty good looking pattern.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
So,
I mean, no question.
yeah,
Um, I had something I was going to talk about with this swatching too, and it just went right out of my head. Well, we'll have to come back to that.
stitch
Oh,
patterns.
okay. So, yeah, I think there's a myth that if you're using the yarn that's recommended and you're following the pattern, that you can just use the needle size that the designer has specified. Now, once upon a time, when knitting patterns were designed by sort of, there was a standard that, on this needle size, using this yarn, 90% of the people would get this gauge. I think now with Ravelry, and you have so many people all over the world who knit very, very differently, somebody might come in and say, I designed this pattern and I got this gauge of 22 stitches over 4 inches on a US 3, right? And people are looking at that and thinking, oh, well, I'm using the yarn that they recommend, I'm following the pattern, and I'm going to use a 3. Whereas the people who wrote that pattern, they're the outliers, of the knitting. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. You aren't necessarily going to knit the way the person that designed it knits.
Right.
So your little quirks and the way you hold your yarn and
the way the designer does.
And the way the designer does could be vastly different. And so it's not going to work for you the way it worked for the designer.
Right.
And I said, I think, she said Ravelry changed the world because it used to be patterns were from yarn companies who had designers who worked with their yarns all the time. And they were the rule.
Right.
They created, something. And so there were indeed standards. Right. And then Ravelry came along and people were doing their own thing and submitting it to Ravelry so that other people could do their thing.
Right. And there's no jury on Ravelry. It's not like a juried art or anything.
Right.
Anybody can put anything out there they want to.
Right. And so you just don't know whether what you're doing is going to be the same as what the designer does.
Right.
Even if you're using the exact same yarn.
Right. Exact same yarn. And I also think a myth is that if you have done a gauge swatch and you got gauge, that your sweater's going to fit you or the sweater is going to be the size that you intended. But you and I both know gauge can change.
Yes, depending on how tired you are.
Right. Or, I think the way you knit, it's for people who knit loosely, I think it's much easier to fall back into that loose knitting.
It is. Yeah, well, I always tell people that you can't control your gauge.
Right.
Your gauge is what it is when you're knitting.
But people are so good when they're doing their swatch.
Then when they're concentrating and they're thinking about it, and but you have times where you stop thinking about it.
Like mostly.
Mostly. Knitting is supposed to be meditative, and so you aren't being all tense and stuff. You're supposed to be relaxed, and if you're relaxed, can do things a little bit easier.
You might be more loose. Yeah.
So, if you put your knitting down and then you pick it up, and we always tell people don't ever stop in the middle of a row. If you ever do put it down, stop in the middle of the row and then pick it up and your day has been a total disaster day, right? And then you pick that up again, you would be kind of surprised to look at your knitting a day later. And what happened here?
Right.
A couple of, a few rows back.
Right.
What happened here? And it might well be the fact that you had put your knitting down and when you picked it back up again,
you were in a different headspace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so things could be just slightly different.
Right.
Nothing that you're going to notice at the time, but later on in the whole scheme.
When you go to block it.
When you go to block it. What's going on there? Right?
Yeah, not good. Exactly.
Let's block that out.
Right. But can you? I don't know that we can.
Okay. Pull.
Pull, yeah. Dry blocking. That's okay. So let's talk about plant fibers.
Okay.
All right. I think there is a myth. I think there's a lot of confusion around the term regarding the term elasticity, right? People think, okay, elastic things stretch, right? So we hear that plant-based fibers stretch. So we think, oh, they have a lot of elasticity. But the true definition of elasticity, right, is it stretches and bounces back.
Right.
And plant-based fibers, they
They-
don't.
No, no. Once they stretch, that's where they're pretty much going to stay.
Right. They're not coming back.
They're not coming back.
That's another thing you can't block out. You can't block something smaller.
No, it's hard to push something together.
Yeah. You can't block it smaller. So I think as a rule, for that reason, the idea that plant-based fibers stretch, I think they kind of get a bad rap.
hmm Yeah,
You know?
they do. Uh, and I think people say that they're hard on the hands.
Okay, is that a myth or is that fact?
I think when you first start out using one of them, it's going to feel different enough to you that you think it's scratchy and hard on your hands. But as you work with the yarn, I think, for me, as I work with it, I realize that it's fine, that I'm getting used to what's there,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't feel as foreign or as different from a wool or alpaca or something.
I remember doing that Elon sweater, the one by Shelley Anderson,
Oh yes.
in that paper linen yarn.
Oh yeah.
Right. It was paper linen.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
a Noro,
yeah.
Asagingu.
Asagi-
Okay.
Asagi-
Beautiful to
yeah.
wear. It's like this color,
Mm,
right?
Yeah.
Beautiful to wear. And it's a huge thing. It's worked in the round. And I remember casting that yarn on, my hands ached.
Yeah.
Do you find that too? Just in the
Just
cast
in the cast on, just in the cast on. I think it's because you're doing so much manipulation. When you're casting on,
Mm-hmm.
you're moving in and out in order to get the stitch on the needle.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same as when you're just actually knitting, at least for me.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
Because I didn't hate knitting it.
Yeah.
I just hated casting it on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also probably you're thinking more about, that you don't want the cast, you want the cast on to be even and that sort of
nice.
thing.
Yeah.
So,
And I think too, there's cotton and there's cotton. There's linen and there's linen. Right? So this one that you're wearing is the cotton revive,
cotton revive. Mhm.
which is a chainette,
It's a chainette.
right?
So it's, poofier.
And bouncier.
Yeah, bouncier.
Right? It has that kind of recovery.
Yeah.
Which I think is brilliant.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I found this very easy to work with
yeah. And comfortable to wear.
and comfortable with.
Yeah.
Very comfortable with.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And I think too, you look at, I think for a lot of, again, newer knitters, the first cotton they come in contact with is dishcloth cotton,
Yeah. Mhm.
which is really unpleasant to knit
Yes.
or crochet or
crochet,
whatever.
yeah, no, yeah.
It's stiff and
Mhm.
it feels like string because it's so tightly applied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is pretty much string.
Yeah. But but they're both plant-based fibers. They're just, as you said, different.
They're different.
You have to get used to them.
Yeah.
Right. So here's another myth that I think I mentioned it in the newsletter. I can't remember at this point. Yarn substitution. That you can substitute any yarn in any pattern as long as you get gauge. Myth, fact.
I think you'd be pretty disappointed a number of times if you weren't careful about what the properties of the yarn were that you were substituting versus the properties of the yarn that the designer had in mind.
Yes. Have you ever had that happen to you? Like you were disappointed?
No, I don't think so because mostly, I look for something that's similar. If I
Mhm.
can't get the yarn that and mostly there's so many yarns out there now, you don't necessarily have to find the yarn that the designer used, but you do want to know what the properties are
Right.
of it because it's not it's not just gauge, it's the design itself and
Mhm.
it's the drape,
Mhm.
it's the style of the item. And even something as simple as a shawl. I mean, you don't want a shawl that's not going to wrap around you properly. That would be sort of weird to have a shawl that
Was stiff.
I thought about that.
I have a saying. I used to say this when I was teaching classes in person a lot. Just because you can get gauged doesn't mean that you should get gauged with your.
Yeah, no, yeah, just because you can get gauged doesn't mean you should be doing it.
Right.
That's that's a rule, not a myth.
Yeah,
No,
that is
no,
absolute
yeah,
100% fact,
right.
not a myth.
Not a myth. Don't do
Sorry
it.
for my dogs
Don't do
barking.
it.
Right. Knit a sweater. I really wanted to knit this sweater. I thought it was beautiful. And I wasn't thinking too much about it, but I had this beautiful white Annie Blatt wool. And it was like an Aran weight, 16. And I knit that thing and it was so stiff.
Yes.
Do you remember? I think we might have
Yeah,
brought
I
it
do,
to the
yes,
shop.
yeah.
It had a grosgrain.
Oh yes,
You
yes.
remember that?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So
Uh,
now you have Charlie there with you. Hello, Charlie.
Charlie's been in and out.
Okay, so here's another one that I want to talk about. There is one best cast on for everything. I hear that. Oh, what's the best cast on? What's the best cast on?
What is the best cast on?
That's like saying, what's the best wine?
Right. Yeah. There are so many cast-ons. I don't even know all of the cast-ons. I do know that
Yeah, me
there's
either.
like what 50 different ways of casting things on.
Well, Shirley Payton did a whole class
She
on
did a
it.
class on it, I gotta tell you that by the time she got to like the 7th cast on, everybody was saying, really? Do we
Yeah.
have to continue with
My
this?
head hurts.
Right. My head hurts, but I can't handle all of this. Yeah, I think what happens is you have a favorite cast on.
Okay, fair.
You have a favorite
That's
cast
fair.
on. It isn't necessarily the best cast on for every single item.
I remember you saying that before you came to Crazy for You, you did the cable cast on for everything.
It was the only cast on I knew.
And you had done that for like everything.
Yeah.
Right? And you were happy with that.
I was okay with it. There are occasional times where it would be too tight.
Okay.
So, but
And that's what you noticed about the cable cast on is that it could be too tight.
yeah, there
Yeah.
like a sweater bottom.
Right. It is very firm.
Yeah, it's very firm.
Right.
But it was what I was taught
Sure.
when I was learning how to knit, and I never took formal classes until I wanted to learn how to do continental.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't cover cast-ons at all.
She didn't.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just basically the knitting.
What's your favorite cast on now?
I tend to just do
Long tail?
long tail. Sometimes the German.
Oh, the German twisted.
Yeah,
That's everybody's darling right now.
yeah, that's a big thing right now. But I don't see that much difference
Mm-hmm.
in my cast-ons between that and long tail.
The German twisted and the long tail.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it's more elastic. I would have to do an actual, test
Yeah.
to see, with the exact same yarn, exact same needles, and really sort of see how that goes.
So, but yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with the long tail.
Yeah.
I'm do most of the stuff. That's long tail.
Here's a myth. This is a definite myth. Casting over, if your cast on is too tight, casting on with a bigger needle will make it looser.
Right.
That's a
Yes.
myth. Oh,
Yeah.
well,
And it's often in instructions.
I know. Okay, so here's a question, because you're the cable cast on queen. If you cast on over a bigger needle with a cable cast on, does that make it looser? Is that one of those things where you've got X and Y, but you're applying it incorrectly? This is true in this situation, but then when you apply it to a different
Yeah, I mean,
situation,
it could be because when you're doing the cable cast on, you're going in into wrapping and then pulling it out and bringing it over. So it might be that, if you were doing a cable cast on and you did a bigger needle, but I would think you'd have to go, not just one size, but maybe two sizes up
Yeah.
to get something that was going to be looser.
That would be a fun experiment too,
Yeah,
to
probably just
see if,
sit there and do it and see what happened with cast-ons.
but it's definitely
Mhm.
a fallacy when you've got a long tail cast on.
Right.
If you cast on over a bigger needle, if your long tail cast on is too tight and you cast on over a bigger needle, if you're doing your cast on the same way, you could cast on, I always say, over a tree trunk, and it's not gonna make your cast on any looser.
Yeah, I think
It's just gonna make your first
well,
row
it's going to make your
looser.
first yeah, put your cast on. It's not
Your cast on
because your
is still
cast
tight.
on with a long tail is more of it's not the needle as much as it is your fingers.
Right, it's the
Your-
distance between the stitches,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
So I love that. Maybe I'll do a whole video on that, like a short.
So, yeah,
and
so
show.
so that might be if you were doing cable because that is requiring you to actually wrap the yarn on the needles
Mhm.
because you're using two needles to do
Yeah.
a cable.
Right,
You're not using just your hands to create a stitch and stick it on a needle.
right. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's kind of interesting, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hadn't really thought about that, but I think that would make a difference because I haven't done a cable cast on in a long time.
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, there are other myths too regarding cast-ons, like the E-wrap cast-on is worthless.
I like the E-wrap cast on.
It has its
It
place.
has its place if you're adding stitches
Yeah,
at the end of a row or at the beginning of a row.
right.
Yeah.
Particularly, and I found this out when I was doing the cocoa knits. If you're knitting in the round, top down, and you're casting on those stitches, you definitely want an E-wrap cast
Yeah,
on
'cause
there.
you don't want another row of stitches.
And you don't want what I did is I went, oh, I know better. I'll put in a cable cast on and that'll be tidier because the E-wrap cast on is messy. It was too tight.
It was too tight.
You've got
Too
this
tight.
very firm bit.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, it's not like it couldn't wear the thing, but it was definitely tight,
Tight. Yeah. Mhm. But also
So-
the cable cast on would actually add a row. E-wraps don't add rows.
No, they don't add a row. The cable cast on you can sort of put in there. And I don't think it matters that you have an extra row.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely. That is something that you need to be aware of
Mhm.
when you're adding. You're going to get that a little jog
Yeah.
when you add extra stitch when you do a cable cast on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because again, casting on is something you tend to learn when you first learn to knit. Obviously,
Right.
you have to learn to cast on in order to start knitting, right? And depending on who taught you,
Hmm.
that's the one that you tend to use until you hear otherwise.
Right.
Uh,
Or
I
the
mean,
designer tells you.
or the designer tells you a specific cast on to use. Like Shelley Anderson always, was the German twisted.
She
cast.
loves that.
Yeah, she loves to do that. But I could remember uh, some of our customers coming in, and I was shocked to find out that E-wrap was the one that was used by this person, and
This person who's a good knitter.
who was a good knitter,
Huh.
and it was her standard cast on.
And that's what she did.
That's what she did.
Because that's what she knew.
Because that's what she did.
Yeah.
That's what she learned, and she had been doing that for almost as many years as I've been doing a cable cast on.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So, if you're not exposed to the other possibilities, then you just continue on with what you were doing.
Right. And I mean, I think it's sort of like, what is a beginner? I think there's this myth that a beginner is anybody who's been knitting for fewer than a certain number of years or months. But I don't think that's really true at all. I think a beginner is somebody who hasn't experienced a lot of different techniques and done a lot of different things. I mean, I look at these certain knitters. I mean, we've had them in the shop. They knit the same thing over and over. They've been knitting, they only knit socks, and they've been knitting the same sock
Mhm.
for 40 years.
Right.
Does that make them an advanced knitter?
Makes them an advanced sock knitter of that particular pattern.
It makes them very experienced with that pattern,
Right.
right?
Right. But not what I would consider an advanced knitter,
Right.
because they don't know the other techniques.
But somebody
And
who,
it's always techniques to learn too.
right. But somebody who's, starts and then immediately tries new things and, is experimenting and doing different things, they could have been knitting for less than 2 years and be more advanced
More
as a
advanced,
knitter
right.
than somebody who's been knitting the same
Sure.
sock for 40
Because
years.
they've got the guts to try something different.
Right.
To experiment and maybe to fail, but to learn.
Right.
And I think that's the whole trick. Is this continuing to add to your knowledge of the knitting in one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
So, talking about failing, you've been designing this cardigan, not failing, but try. And I love this. I love this so much about you. You're designing this sleeve cap, and it's been a challenge, right?
it has been a definite challenge. Yes.
How many times have you knit it and pulled it out?
4.
Is that like so frustrating? Do you just want to shoot yourself?
Yes, it's sort of like, there has to be a better way to do it. And, I looked at the books, talked to Ellen. We have ideas. I'm in the process of, I'm just about ready to do another one, because I left the last one that I finished, that we decided wasn't the way it's supposed to be.
Not our
It
favorite.
was not our favorite. So I decided I would knit the other sleeve, and then I was going to try to adjust the directions from a couple of designers whose things I've tried and I haven't liked, that they haven't worked out. It's sort of interesting. You think of a sleeve cap, has the usual, so it comes in this way and then it goes up and it comes around. And we were saying, if you're, it's a standard bell curve type
Right.
thing.
It's a bell curve.
It's a bell curve.
For
It's a
sure.
bell curve. Right. And you'll see that when you see all of the diagrams of sleeves. Sleeves go up here, cuts in here, and it cuts around. Well,
But they're not all to scale.
they're not all to scale. And the thing is that when you start seeing what the directions are and what the formulas are of the thing, if you look carefully, they don't really curve. They just kind of go up.
Right. They don't curve because there's no curves in knitting.
Because there's no curves in knittings. You have to create curves by, you can bind off or you can decrease.
Right.
And
Knitting is digital.
yeah,
It's not what's that other not digital analog. It's not, you can't get a smooth
yeah,
curve.
it's all very, and it's very linear.
Yeah.
You can't. It's not like, I'm sewed for years and years
Yes.
and years.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so cutting a curve on a piece of fabric is really simple.
Right. You just cut it.
You just cut it.
But you can't
But
do
you
a
can't-
third of a stitch.
You can't
it's
do it.
one stitch or zero
two
stitches.
right? Or 2 stitches.
Right.
No,
Right. But
there's
it's not a fraction.
It's not a fraction. You can't
integers.
do it. Right. Right. So I am going to work on another formula.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and figure out a formula that's going to give me the semblance of a bell curve.
Yeah.
So, and it can't be as, like one of the designers divides things into like 3 sections. Another one divides it in 4 sections. And I'm thinking that it's probably going to need more like 6 sections.
I think you're probably right.
And the only way I'm going to be able to do it really is to chart it out after I know exactly how many rows I'm going to have.
Yeah.
It's very math oriented.
Absolutely.
So it's all very
The
much
designing is.
the designing.
The knitting, not so much.
Yeah, the knitting not so much, but the designing is because you're working with inches and rows and stitches.
Right.
And it's you really have to know the gauge, and your gauge isn't necessarily a whole number.
Right.
So
Your gauge is. That's
your
why we
gauge.
have it over 4 inches instead of over 1 inch like
Right.
it used to be.
Yeah. So so you really have to, work your way through what you're going to be doing, and you've got to stay within the confines of, how much space do I have?
Right. And
Mhm.
it's harder for
So
different sizes and the grading.
yeah, the grading, yeah. So that's the one that's, once I get this done, then I have to sort of sit at the computer and grade
Right.
and,
So
and swear a lot at myself.
it doesn't sound like this is a myth, but the reason I bring this up is because one myth that we hear is once you know how to knit and purl and you've made socks and sweaters, then you know everything there is to know about knitting. You will never
You will
know
never
everything.
know everything there is about knitting. I've been knitting longer than most of you have been alive.
How many years?
How many years? Seriously knitting.
Seriously knitting, making things
Seriously
that
knitting,
you're proud.
making things. So that would be 62 years.
Yeah, that's a decent amount of time,
Mhm.
right? So you learned to knit as a child, but then when you were in your 20s, you started knitting things. Yes?
Actually, when I was in my teens,
Okay.
I started knitting things.
Okay.
You,
Yeah.
you know the story about the Argyle socks.
I do, but they
Yeah,
don't.
okay.
So I love this.
When I was in junior high, yeah. Yeah. Well, I was probably around eighth or ninth grade. I don't remember exactly which. Uh, Argyle socks were very popular. If you've been listening to these numbers and you're doing the math yourself, you know how old I am. But at any rate, Argyle socks were
She's
very
older than she looks.
yeah. Argyle socks were very popular, and I had learned to knit as a kid. My mother had taught me, and did the usual kind of doll blankets.
Right, right.
Nothing really. And I decided I was going to make a pair of Argyle socks. Very first thing I was ever going to make. I got my yarn at Woolworths. If anybody knows what a
That's
Woolworths
where the
is,
first yarn came
5
from.
and dime.
Yes.
Right. They had a notions department that had yarn in it.
Right.
And
Did you get those metal aluminum needles? They were like
yes,
pink or whatever.
Susan Bates.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. Because that's who there was.
That's what there was. Anyway, I bought the needles, and I had to, of course, buy a set of double pointed needles.
Right.
And in those days, double pointed needles only came in groups of 4.
Right.
Now you get 5.
Yeah.
But those you had 4. And I had this little book of instructions that also I believe came from Woolworths. And it had Argyle socks in it. And I had to buy little bobbins. And it was one of those things where you say Argyle socks, and you had the yarn and these bobbins hanging from these double pointed needles, and you were working in the round. Well, you're working a triangle, basically.
Right. We're working in the
You're
triangle.
Working a triangle. And it was sort of like after I did them and was doing other things, I thought, this was probably the stupidest thing to start knitting.
But you wanted to.
But I wanted to. And so I learned how to do it. I
Right.
figured out how to do it, of how to carry those stitches, how to carry those yarns, how to close up the holes that were going to be created by changing a yarn,
Mhm.
right? And the instructions being just one of those little pamphlet things, they were pretty darn good, apparently.
Oh, I think so.
So
Those books, they were very clear.
They were very
And they were
clear.
drawings.
Yeah, and so that was it. So I made my Argyle socks. I never did become an avid sock knitter.
No, you didn't. You don't do socks.
I don't do socks.
I mean, you can, obviously.
I have done socks. Let's put it that way. I have done socks, but I really don't do socks. I'd rather put my time into a sweater.
Yeah, same.
So my daughter loves to do socks.
She does. Yeah.
Mhm.
And she's good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, that's maybe another myth is that you have to start with a pattern that is, appropriate for your skills or whatever. You have to do a dishcloth, you have to do a scarf. I think you have to do for your first project, and not for your learning, but don't you think for your first project, you have to do something that inspires you?
You have to do something that you want done.
Yes.
you want to do this, you want to wear it or to give it or do something,
Yeah.
there has to be a goal.
Right. It has to inspire you.
And it has to
make
inspire.
you
It has
want
to
to
be,
do
you
it.
want to do it. You want to do it, and you will struggle through the hard parts because you really want to finish this.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that I think is a beautiful place to end today.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If you have knitting myths on your mind or that you've heard and you're wondering about, put them in the comments. We answer every single comment that we get. If you're new to the channel and you are not subscribed and you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. And we are Ellen
And Ginny.
signing off, and we will see you next time. Thank you.